have been playing a lot of Splatoon lately, and not just Splatoon 3, which I love by the way, but I've also been going back and revisiting the first two games, Splatoon 1 and 2, and even replayed Octo Expansion on stream. It's been really fun to revisit these and see how the series has grown and evolved over the years. One of the most interesting things is the difference in stage design philosophy. I like a lot of Splatoon 3 stages, but the vast majority of them are actually returning stages from previous games. So I thought it would be interesting, since I couldn't find an exact stage comparison video, figured, well, I'll just make one. So today we're going to be examining Splatoon 1 stages that return in Splatoon 3 and the differences between these versions. All right, let's hop into it. So there's 3 stages in Splatoon 3 that are returning stages from Splatoon 1 on Wii U. Those 3 are Mahi-Mahi Resort, Hammerhead Bridge, and Museum del Fonzino. Although Flounder Heights will actually be returning in a future update. Now, of these returning stages, let's start with the one with the least changes and go forward to the ones with the most changes. Let's kick it off with Museum del Fonzino. It's one of my favorites in both games. It's got these cool spinning platforms, kind of a lowered down middle ground, and the bases are raised on either side. There aren't too many changes between these versions, although one of the spinning art displays in each side of the map are removed, those being the ones right near the spawning point. So in the Splatoon 1 Wii U version, there are actually 5 spinning platforms, where in Splatoon 3, there are only 3. I don't mind this change, to be honest. I feel like the one in the base is kind of useless. Otherwise, the rest of the changes are minor. There are some blocks added to segment these side areas more, since the path no longer connects to the middle ground directly, and there are some differences in elevation of the ground. So these sloped areas are a little less steep in Splatoon 3. The elevation is more drastic in the first game, and there are some parts where instead of having a slope, you have to hop up here. It's like walled off almost. The central platform in the middle of the middle ground is also a little lower down in Splatoon 3, meaning that you can't just swim or walk straight across when these platforms align. You actually have to make a little hop and jump over to the next one. It's a very minimal change. It's almost pointless, really. The rest of it being a little flattened out, a little less elevated, or a little less steep with these slopes is all right by me. I like Museum del Fonzino a lot. I think the changes are positive. I think it's really good in Splatoon 3. Still a very solid, still one of the best stages in the first game. So all around, not too much there. The next one is Mahi-Mahi Resort. This is the one with the next amount of changes, something of a middle ground between the two. It has a fair amount of difference, but also a fair amount that's recognizably the same. So kind of a middle ground there. So the base areas are pretty much completely overhauled. Almost like they're flipped 90 degrees, and everything's a little more spread out. There's more of these side islands with the graded bridges between them. The bases kind of slope to the sides and then meet in the middle. Whereas in Splatoon 3's version, they are kind of a straight shot towards the middle, like they're rotated 90 degrees, and everything's just a little more compact in Splatoon 3. So the stage is actually a bit smaller. I don't mind this all that much. I think having everything spread out means there's a lot more hazard in Splatoon 1's version of Mahi-Mahi, where there's more hazard, there's more areas where you can fall in the water. And then if you're on those side islands, you're a little more removed from the action in Splatoon 1, which can be good, can be bad. It kind of depends on what sort of player you are, I guess. But keeping everything a little more concise and compact in the middle, I kind of have mixed feelings about the changes, if I'm being honest with you. I can't quite discern if it's positive or negative. In Splatoon 1, as soon as you leave the spawn, if you wanted to hop to those side islands, there's like 5 of them. 5 elevated areas here that you could hop between. Whereas in Splatoon 3, there's only 2, and they're much closer together and much closer to the middle ground. The middle ground is actually pretty similar. You've got this wide open space, lots of balloons, and 3 central towers in the middle. Now those are the same in Splatoon 1, but the central tower is more rectangular instead of a square in Splatoon 1, whereas in Splatoon 3, they're all sort of uniform, except for a block being on the central one. So it's a little tweaked, but the central area remains mostly unchanged. And then of course, it still retains the gimmick of the water level dropping midway through the match to reveal extra terrain to ink I think Mahi-Mahi is still a good stage, a little more compact and concise in Splatoon 3. Again, I have mixed feelings about the changes to this one. Unlike the museum stage, it almost doesn't feel like the same stage. It feels like a original stage that's like inspired by the concepts and mechanics of the first one, just because of how different the bases are. I still like Mahi-Mahi in Splatoon 3. I think it's still a solid stage. I actually don't mind having less hazards because Splatoon is already such a chaotic game in the first place, so having less to avoid is not necessarily a bad thing, especially for newer players. One thing that I noticed is there's a lot less of those balloons. I feel like in Splatoon 1, there's just a lot more that obstructs your vision. I think that's one of the biggest differences here between these two versions of Mahi-Mahi Resort, is that there's just a lot less of your vision obstructed in Splatoon 3. Like there's fewer of these big balloons, and so when you're at your spawn point, you can pretty much see across the whole stage, which kind of gives you a better sense of the layout here at a glance. Whereas in Splatoon 1, there's a lot more to get in the way of what you're looking at and a lot more to get in the way of your view, and so you kind of just have to rely on your map more or get to know the layout a little more without just being able to immediately get a sense of the space at a glance. So that is one of the big differences, but I have a soft spot for the original Mahi-Mahi. I think it's a fun stage. I think it was one of the cooler stages in the first game, so it's cool to see it kind of come back in a different form. Like I said before, mixed feelings. And next up, let's look at Hammerhead Bridge. This is the stage that has the most changes, hands down. It might as well not even be the same stage, if I'm being honest. In Splatoon 1, Hammerhead Bridge is a bridge that is under construction. That's sort of the theme of the stage here that they really leaned into. So it's completely under construction. There's scaffolding and metal grating everywhere. And there's this sort of two-level system where the grated areas are sort of making up the top level of the stage, and then it's all solid ground below. It's a very narrow stage, and on that bottom section there's a lot of variation in platforms, things you can climb and hide behind, lots of obstacles. It's a pretty busy stage actually. I do think because of that busyness, it's a little hard at first to get a sense of the space. There's a lot of little side areas that are walled off, and even like some hallways that are like a dead end, it feels like. As far as turf war goes, it's a fun stage, but it's actually not my favorite from Splatoon 1, which I think is going to be an unpopular opinion because a lot of people really liked the stage. But I think its biggest strength was the two levels, in which it's sort of a risk and reward thing, because on the one hand you have the high ground, but being on that elevated section also removes your ability to swim, so you can't take cover or refill your ink while you're up there either. So it's sort of a risk reward sort of scenario there, right? The games chronologically take place in real time ahead of each other, so Splatoon 3 is literally set 7 years after the first game, so it only makes sense that construction is complete in Splatoon 3's version of Hammerhead Bridge. And it retains the concept of being this long, narrow stage, although I think it's actually larger in Splatoon 3, unlike Mahi-Mahi, which was more condensed. So everything's a little more spread out, but all that remains of that two-level system are a couple of sections of grating that are sort of on either side of the central area. Everything else is pretty much completely new. They're both Hammerhead Bridge, but they're not even remotely the same stage. It's basically a brand new version with the same name and inspiration. There are some areas that feel like they were taken up from the original, like there's some side areas that I can kind of see, okay, that's what this part used to be in Splatoon 1. There's like a side area to the left before the middle battleground that is retained in Splatoon 3's version. And then of course on either side of the central area are some variations in elevation and some ramps up to the middle. That's also retained in Splatoon 3, but that's about where the similarities end. Everything else is pretty much completely different. The spawning areas are widened. There are different variations in the elevations on all parts of the stage. It is, for all intents and purposes, just a brand new stage with the same name. In the universe, this absolutely makes sense. I actually kind of like this version of Hammerhead Bridge. I think it's a great stage for splat zones in particular. There's less of that risk reward element to the stage, but by the same token, that means you sort of have to rely on your own skill more than the stage. One interesting little detail that I'm a little obsessed with that I think is so cool though, again, this makes sense in universe in terms of game story. The Nils statue, which was the final boss of Splatoon 2's Octo expansion, is still in the water and it's fully visible from Hammerhead Bridge in Splatoon 3. So if you look off to the side, you can see it half submerged in the water there, and it's mostly destroyed state where you left it in the previous game. So there's just a bit of continuity there that I I really appreciate it. It's really cool to see it just sort of out there in the water. Of course, it is not there in Splatoon 1, but it wouldn't make sense for it to be. So neat details that I thought are really good for world building. They didn't have to put the Nils statue out there. They really didn't, but the fact that they did, and they never draw attention to it, it's just there in the background, is just great world building and adds a great sense of continuity. I love that. So those are the, so far, 3 returning stages from Splatoon 1 that show up again in Splatoon 3 and their differences. Let me know which of these stages are your favorites or just your thoughts in general down below in the comments. I always love to have a conversation with you guys. I love reading those lengthy, well thought out comments. Those are my favorite, so don't be shy about that. And let me know if this is the kind of content you want to see or if you want to see more of this stuff or not. You know, let me know. I always want to make content that you guys like. So I appreciate you. Thank you all so much for watching and have a great one. Thank you so much for watching this video. Before we end this off, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to my patrons and channel members, including, but not limited to, Greymage, Brenda, Tetra, Callie, Gail, Hylian Wes, Justin, Clifford Longhead, Midnight Naomi, and Bunny. Thank you all so much for the support and for watching, and I will catch you all next time. Bye-bye.